Great. Hi, everybody. We're going to give everybody one more minute to join. So we'll get started in just a minute. Let everybody log in. Okay, I think we will go ahead and get started. Let me share screen real fast. Let's see. All right. Okay. So thank you all for joining us tonight. We are here to talk about how to talk to your children about human trafficking. And we have some amazing women with us tonight on our panel that I'll introduce in just a second as we kind of get through a few housekeeping notes first that we want to touch on. First and foremost, this is hosted by Junior League of New Orleans, and JLNO is an organization of women committed to promoting volunteerism, developing the potential of women, and improving communities through the effective action of leadership and trained individuals. And specifically, the committee that hosted this tonight is called the Abolish Movement. And that's an Abolish committee, and we have a wonderful committee. Thank you to all of our committee members who are on the call right now who helped kind of facilitate tonight's discussion. But the goal around Abolish was founded in 2014 by the Junior League of Tampa, and it was to unite organizations and agencies drawing attention to the problem of child sex slavery in the Tampa Bay area. Well, in 2017, Association of Junior Leagues, which we refer to as AJLI, actually adopted this movement. And so junior leagues across the country have really enacted this movement on their own. And so each league focuses around truly what bringing awareness and ending human trafficking in their communities. We wouldn't be able to do tonight without Women United. They are a wonderful sponsor for tonight. Just to give you a little background on them, this group is made up of 70,000 women worldwide who have invested $3 million back in our local community. They focus their efforts on eradicating poverty through policy, philanthropy, and programming. And for more information, you can look on the screen I have here is their website, as well as a contact if interested in getting involved. And again, we're very appreciative for them and their support. They also focus around bringing awareness around human trafficking. So it's a wonderful fit of women in our community coming together to bring awareness around this issue. So without further ado, I'm very excited to introduce tonight's panelists of speakers. We have three incredible women here tonight to talk to us about how to talk to your children about human trafficking. Just a few housekeeping notes. If you can, please make sure that you're muted, and we will definitely open this up for Q&A at the end. So please, if you have, ask your questions throughout in the chat box, and we will definitely address them at the end of tonight's discussion. And then it will be recorded and provided back to all attendees or anybody who signed up and maybe wasn't able to join us. So now I'll introduce these wonderful women that we have tonight. So Jennifer Best is the clinical care manager at Eden House, and we're very appreciative of Eden House and our continued partnership with them. She has an MA in psychology and counseling at New Orleans Baptist Theological Seminary. She has extensive training and experience in trauma counseling and crisis intervention, and has spent her time working in private and nonprofit counseling centers. She is an adjunct professor at, hopefully I'm saying this right, Level College in New Orleans, where she teaches introduction to psychology and marriage and family issues. Her responsibilities at Eden House include developing individualized care plans with residents, facilitating in-house meetings and support groups, and leading their prevention program. Let's see, she completed training as a prevention education facilitator through My Life, My Choice in Boston, Massachusetts. And then for any of you who joined us at our previous webinar, so this is our second in our three-part series, Susan is back with us and we're so appreciative. She is the system administrator for Truckers Against Trafficking. In this role, she is bookkeeper, HR manager, helps to manage the Freedom Drivers project and equips companies to educate their staff to combat human trafficking. So she does it all. She has been involved in the anti-trafficking realm for over 10 years. She co-founded a local nonprofit in Denver and helped to start a recovery house, and is very passionate about educating people on the realities of domestic sex trafficking. So we welcome Susan back with us again. Thank you again. And then last but definitely not least, Maria Isabella assists, let me actually say her title first. So she's Human Trafficking Social Worker at the Audrey Hepburn Care Center. She's a forensic interviewer for New Orleans Children's Advocacy Center. So she assists in the identification and response to child sex and labor trafficking within Orleans Parish at Children's Hospital, New Orleans. She does this through coordination of forensic interviews, forensic medical evaluations, and needed services. She provides extensive case management, crisis counseling, and safety planning to high-risk victims of pornography, and sex and labor trafficking victims, and their non-offending caregivers. She's also a forensic interviewer. She collaborates with the Greater New Orleans Task Force, works to increase Children's Hospital capacity to identify victims of labor and trafficking. So again, ladies, thank you so much for being with us tonight. And I will turn it over to Susan, who will help us moderate tonight's discussion.
Great, thank you, Michelle. I so appreciate being asked to do this again. So we are going to be talking about how to talk to your children about human trafficking, which of course has been in the news a lot. And we know with our children online, they are more at risk now, and we will get into a little bit of that for sure throughout the discussion. So I look forward to all that we have for you. First, I do want to start with a definition of human trafficking. Jennifer, if you could provide us with that, and then also maybe why awareness around the issue is important.
Sure. Sorry, can you hear me? I had it on mute. Yeah, so according to the U.S. Department of State, human trafficking is recruiting, harboring, transporting, providing, or obtaining a person for compelled labor or commercial sex acts through the use of force, fraud, or coercion. And then what was the second question?
Yeah, just why awareness around that issue is important.
Yeah, I think we've gained some ground over the last several years of bringing more awareness to this topic. But like you mentioned earlier, just the use of online. We spent most of 2020 online, and just being aware that this is an issue. When we're aware of it, then we can help fight against it.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is happening to adults, and that definition really applies to adults.
Yeah.
And I did this last time too. Anytime a minor, though, is involved in a commercial sex act, it is automatically a crime, right? And so we're talking about, protecting our children here on social media and talking to them about human trafficking. But anytime a minor is involved in a commercial sex act, it is automatically a crime, and they need someone to stand up for them, for sure.
Absolutely.
Now, human trafficking, talking about sex trafficking, labor trafficking isn't so horrific, but boy, to talk to kids about what is sex trafficking, that's tough. So let's kind of start maybe might be a simple question, maybe perhaps not, but maybe Maria, you could answer this. Maybe at what age should parents actually start talking to their kids about sex trafficking or human trafficking in general? But
sure. So I don't think that age is necessarily the factor that you want to consider most. When talking to kids about human trafficking, we want to make sure that we're not instilling fear in them, but instead giving them the tools to make healthy decisions and problem solve if they're ever in danger or they find themselves in danger. I think it's really important that when we're talking to kids about human trafficking, we're including a conversation about the social constructs that perpetuate human trafficking. So that would be different vulnerabilities, such as being a child. Kids can't consent for themselves, so that alone is a vulnerability. Poverty is a vulnerability. People, if people are teaching their kids to look for the man in the white van, well, you're missing this whole other spectrum of people who can also take advantage of those kids. So I think it's really important that conversations about human trafficking really open up the line of communication between parents and their kids. And I think that a conversation about human trafficking has to center both around, commercial sex, but also providing labor services, because there are kids who are taken advantage of for labor or for services, such as in the hospitality industry.
Jennifer, anything to add to that?
I think I would just add, I look at talking to our children about human trafficking or just sex in general more as a marathon, and as it builds on, it has building blocks. And it's not just this one conversation and you're done. And it can start as early as, a toddler, not necessarily about human trafficking, but what it means to be, to respect our bodies, and just using those opportunities as you are parenting your child, such as, brushing their teeth and, having them, develop good hygiene and all of that, as you're teaching them about their bodies, using those opportunities to teach them what's safe and not safe. And so again, it's like I look at it more of like a building block, age appropriate, conversations.
Yeah, and I think that's the key, right, is age appropriate.
Yes.
Telling our kids, with more and more of our kids online nowadays during all of this COVID craziness, kids as young as preschoolers are online for school. And so teaching them even things like, if something pops up that is scary or different, or makes you feel sad or confused, that's also just a great starting point for our kids of, if something might be wrong, and let me know, right? Let me know if something kind of pops up.
Right.
Oh yeah, I wish we could say that. Talk to your kids when they're 10, right?
I know,
Or 12.
right?
But the reality, we really need to start talking to our kids as young as possible.
Sure.
Like you said, Jennifer, building blocks, right?
Yes,
When
absolutely.
they're little, it's your body. When they're a little bit older, it's, let's be careful, and for sure being online, stranger danger, and we'll talk about some of that. But Maria, you brought up some good points, or a good point about risks, right? About vulnerabilities. And so are some children or teens, do you think, more at risk for trafficking, Maria?
That's a hard question to answer. So, one myth about human trafficking is that it only happens to women and girls. And when we latch on to non-facts such as that, we're actually missing an entire population that's also being exploited. And that's, boys, that's men, that's the LGBTQ population. So we want to make sure that we're including them as well. I just lost my train of thought.
We were talking about vulnerabilities.
Yeah, so that alone is a vulnerability, is how people perceive what a victim looks like. Another thing that's important to know, and I'm sure Jennifer can talk about this more broadly, but human trafficking doesn't discriminate against a skin color, a race, a gender identity, sex. It just doesn't discriminate. So it's really, really important to make note of that, when we are teaching people about human trafficking and when we're understanding it. There are vulnerabilities that are specific to New Orleans that I would say put kids possibly a little more at risk for exploitation. We are a port city. We're now an international airport. We're on the I-10 corridor, so it's really easy to transport kids to and from different parishes. And like I said earlier, poverty really is a big risk factor. People do things to survive in order to survive and to meet their needs. So, we can't just ignore that.
Yeah, vulnerabilities, I think our kids are just, like you said, just vulnerable, right? And with our kids being online even more, as I'm going to probably say 100 times today, it just puts them at a greater risk already.
Yes.
It's good to know about New Orleans in general, vulnerabilities there in New Orleans. That's good. So do we know of any trainings that exist to help our kids with online trafficking? Jennifer, do you know of any?
Training specifics, that was a challenge as I, was trying to gather research. I knew I was speaking, with you guys tonight, and it was a challenge to try to find some resources specifically for parent training. I think in my introduction, I was trained with My Life, My Choice, but it is a prevention program for underage kids, 18 and under, who are already have been identified as being at risk. So, Maria, you may have some suggestions and some resources. I looked at, there were several different things that you could find, but as far as, I was having trouble with that. Yeah.
So as far as talking to kids about human trafficking, you want to approach every child differently, no matter what kind of conversation you're having. There are evidence-based curriculums, just like Jennifer mentioned. We're both facilitators in My Life, My Choice. That's a curriculum that is facilitated with a survivor advocate and for youth who, we think may be trafficked but aren't quite disclosing, or they already have been trafficked, and we want to help them understand what happened to them. Another curriculum that's evidence-based and used with kids is Love 146. That is a 5-hour, 5-module training for kids in which they learn. It's not as much about like, this is what human trafficking is. It's, these are the things that can happen that can lead to human trafficking. These are ways to safety plan. If you are ever in this situation, these are things that you can do. And helping kids understand that traffickers can be anyone. And them being kids alone is a vulnerability. As far as research for talking with kids about trafficking, it doesn't really exist. When I'm talking with youth at Children's Hospital who aren't identifying as trafficking victims for a number of reasons, either they don't understand that they were trafficked, they don't identify as a victim and it was empowering for them. But I really just have a conversation about needs. We all have needs. I'm not sure if y'all are familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but it's the one thing that we all have in common as people. So when we teach kids to identify their needs and identify how they can meet those needs within their own environment, we can empower them to look for other ways to survive other than, engaging in sex or providing services.
Yeah, I know there's some good resources out there for parents to start some conversations. I was looking at, there's something called End Sexual Exploitation. It's a nonprofit, and they have something called 10 conversation starters for parents. Great ways to engage your kids in this topic. Sometimes we don't want to just jump in, especially if we have teenagers. Hey, do you know what sex trafficking is? Hey, how do we stop it? Blah blah blah. It's let's talk to our kids and say, hey, what are you experiencing? What's going on in your life? What platforms are you on? Talking and engaging them in conversation, and then gearing, of course, that conversation towards something where it goes into, well, what is trafficking? How would that look like for you, right? Crime Stoppers has a cybersecurity topic. So if you go to Crime Stoppers, they're nationwide. They have some topics on cyber safety, gaming, social media safety. ProtectYoungMinds.org is another one as well that has some great resources for parents. But let's talk about the social media aspect of this. How now with us online, again saying that everyone online, how do we protect our kids online today? Jennifer, what are your thoughts?
This is a topic that my husband and I have discussed. We've got 2 kids, and we have discussed since, since they were born, of how are we going to handle phones, and how, because we grew up without cell phones, so it wasn't, a big issue for us. And so, watching my nieces and nephews grow up, and all of the challenges that they have, we've just, I think it's helpful, definitely having to come up with boundaries as a family. Like, what are some rules and regulations that you want to come up with, and what's important to you guys as a family? What can we go ahead right out of the gate? This is what we will and will not do. I think, being able to set those for them and then hold them accountable to that. There's also apps out there. There's tons of apps that you can download that can filter everything, like anything that they may post on a social media site or even a text message. It filters, it picks up these words. It can pick up like if there's predatory words being used, it'll flag that. It has, tracking devices and, all of that. So there's plenty of apps out there that as a parent you can get connected with that will help you, because it's exhausting. It is exhausting trying to raise children in 2020 and keeping them safe. And so if I can pay a monthly fee or a yearly fee that can help me get an extra set of eyes, then I am all for that.
Yeah, I know that Bark is a really good app. Not paid by them. I have no idea about them. My kids are older, so I don't need it.
That was, yeah.
But I know that Bark is a great app to get, because we're not always around our kids. And even if we're with our kids, sitting with our kids, they could be texting on the phone. They could be on, some app doing something. And even though we're right next to them, we are not seeing what they are doing. Yeah. And so, we don't necessarily want to have that filter be the end all be all.
Right.
But it is for sure a great starting point to have for our kids.
Absolutely. And I am not a representative for Bark either, but I love it. And right now through December 31st, like the first package is free for life. So if you register through them. So yeah.
There you go, parents. First step right there. Go get started. Even though we're not paid by them. Right. Okay, so Maria, maybe you could have any other talking points for talking with your kids about this topic. What do you do if you feel a little bit uncomfortable? How do we talk to our kids, right, about feeling uncomfortable about something online?
I think the first thing that you want to do is, well, first off, you want to make sure that you really have a secure bond with your child. It can be awkward having this conversation with kids, especially when there's discord in that relationship. The whole point of talking to kids about human trafficking is that they know if something happens to me, or if I find myself in a situation, I can call my caregiver. That's the very first thing that you want to establish. For caregivers who want to talk to kids about how it's a little bit uncomfortable, first normalize those feelings. It's normal for any of us to cry. It's normal for us to feel uncomfortable. And the important thing is how we respond to those emotions. So just normalizing that for kids. Something that Jennifer said that really stuck out to me was the fact that her whole family together is having this conversation about how to introduce a phone. When you're introducing a phone or social media to your child, or rather, let me back up a little bit. Often I talk to caregivers who are reacting to their kids and how they use their phone instead of preventing these things from happening. I'm 26, about to be 27, and if you put a new Apple gadget in front of me, I'm going to go crazy and get all excited about that. So what's stopping a child who's 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 from getting excited about that? I think what's really going to be important is identifying the right time to give your child technology and a phone. So some kids, it may be 7 years old. Some kids, it may be 10, 13, 16. But you want to sit down and see how your kid is doing. If you have a child who's really lonely and introverted, can't identify healthy peer supports, can't identify a sport or a dance or some extracurricular that they like to do, and they have a hard time identifying a positive person in their life, they're going to use that phone to have all of those emotional needs met instead. So you want to look at your kid and say, what things are in place for my child that are protecting them having a supportive caregiver, having activities that they're passionate about, having their needs for food, safety, and school met. These are all things that are going to affect what happens when parents give their kids phones.
Yeah, great information there, that's for sure. I mean, we just need to continually be talking to our kids. I mean, I've got, my youngest is 18, but you know, your kids, as you know, go through ranges of emotions. Well, maybe not you, Maria, but kids go through ranges of emotions. I mean, 3 days ago, she was madder than anything at me, wouldn't say a word to me. But today we're good. So, you know, today I could carry on those conversations with her, but yesterday, not a chance. So picking and choosing some great times to have those conversations with your kids, and making sure that you're supportive. I always told my kids, no matter what happens, I'm here for you. Mm-hmm. No matter what, right? So when my kids were in high school, it was, if you're out at a party, if you're uncomfortable, you just say your mom called and you call me and you say, Mom, I need to come home. Or you know, if they're doing drugs and you don't want to do drugs and you don't want to say, I don't want to do drugs, then you know what? You just call me and you just say, oh, I'm sorry, my mom called. So yeah, you just always want to just tell them you're there for them no matter what. So when they can come to you with something that's a little uncomfortable, then it's a little bit easier to have that conversation. You know, this is all around social media and navigating this stuff with our child. And, you know, no child is not at risk right now. I want to say that. Your kids are online, they're doing things. They could be conversing with people you don't know. So maybe, Jennifer, if you might have some rules per se, or just some thoughts around what we tell our kids when they're online on these apps doing things, some kind of best practices, if you will.
Sure, yeah. So, you know, one thing that we decided when our youngest son entered adolescence was that we were going to hold off on social media as long as we could. So right now he doesn't have, I have 2 boys. He doesn't have a social media account. That is just something that we have decided as a family, that for our best practices, that, you know, we don't want to put him not just in fear of being trafficked, but you know, there's a lot of other drama that comes with posting and a lot of bullying. And so we decided not to do that. But he does play games. He does have a gaming system and he plays with his friends. And so if he were to have a social media site, it would be just like his gaming, is he's not allowed to play with anybody that we don't know. Not even a friend of a friend, that we don't, if we don't know that friend of a friend, then he's not allowed to play with them. And why that's important is if you look at where the recruiting happens, it's usually people that you know, that's placed in our churches, it's placed in our schools, that like are people their age, you know, that's one recruiting tactic. And so, yeah, that's one of our rules, or 2 of our rules, I guess. And then we time it. We want to make sure that they're always, you know, not on there all day. And I will say during the lockdown, it was easy to just let them, because that was their only way to talk to friends and have a social life. And so, you know, just checking in on that, you know, making sure that they're not on there all the time.
Yeah, great. Any other thoughts, Maria, on some good best practices for some social media for maybe the teens?
No, I would, you know, make sure that as a caregiver, you're not chastising the child for being on social media or for being on a gaming system or for having a phone. I think what Jennifer mentioned was really important. So when we're giving our kids these items where they do have an outlet to the greater community, putting those boundaries and restrictions in place from the beginning. Because if you have a lot of something and you're enjoying it and then someone takes it away from you, that's going to make you angry and there's going to be distrust in that relationship. But when you're introducing this new fun gadget with those restrictions that you all agreed upon, it's a little bit more concrete for kids because they know what to expect. Mm-hmm. And they know what's expected of them.
Yeah, and I think having some good conversations about, trusted adults versus not trustworthy adults. Not trustworthy adults are adults we don't know. Trustworthy adults are adults we do know, right? So you never want to go to an untrustworthy person. So you don't ever want to say, accept a friend request from anybody you don't know. That's always been my thing for my kids, right? You don't do that. And I would say, and we're going to go back and we're going to ask about how the traffickers are getting our kids, but I would tell my teenagers, you don't post about things that are bothering you, right? Don't post about your family. My mom's bothering me. She's such a pain. My dad has all these rules for me. Even something as simple as, oh my gosh, we're having family dinner again, because the traffickers are going to prey on those vulnerabilities. Oh, yes, right? So if they've already contacted this person, befriended them in some way, they're just going to say, oh my gosh, I can't believe your parents would have dinner every night for you, and so starting to create a relationship with them in a way, if from a stranger, right? We talk about stranger danger in many instances, and we know that trafficking happens a lot with people that we know or that the person already knows. And I think in the age of now everybody being online, hopefully that will decrease at some point. But right now with our youngest kids being online, we can't be too careful. Never, ever accept a friend request from somebody you don't know. I know in this time through Facebook or Twitter, I've had requests from people. I'm like, who is this person? I don't know this person. Why would I accept a friend request? And with our especially our teenagers who want those more and more likes, right? They want that sense of being important, right? They'll just accept friend requests. So I think it's important to talk to our kids about not accepting friend requests from people that we don't know. So in light of that, let's talk a little bit about how the traffickers are utilizing this time and really any time being online to traffic our kids. Maria, do you want to start with that?
So especially, in the virtual world that we're in right now, and a situation in which a lot of people are losing their jobs, they're unemployed, they can't make ends meet. We don't just want to warn our kids about strangers, but also people they know. I would say that most commonly the kids that I work with are trafficked by someone that they know, whether it was a family member, a person in their house, someone that they hung out with multiple times. And that's part of something called the grooming procedure. And for people who don't know what that means, grooming is a process of preparing a child for sexual abuse. And that can include bribing them, identifying what their vulnerabilities are, or even what their interests are, and creating a bond with that child. Caregivers and family members may be desperate right now, and they're using their kids to make these ends meet. I'm seeing a lot of trafficking, a lot more violent trafficking right now during the pandemic. And I think a lot of it has to do with people being stuck in their houses, and again, turning to things like drug dealing when they can't quite get the supply for human trafficking, pretty much. So people are just getting really desperate. online. A lot of kids are meeting up with people. And we see that, especially at the CAC and the Care Center, over 95% of our kids who are trafficked have experienced some type of physical or sexual abuse before they're trafficked. So right now, we want to make sure that we're protecting our kids in the homes. Parents, I know you're tired. I know you're exhausted. I know you're being teachers, you're being breadwinners, you're being parents. But we at Children's Hospital advise parents not to spank their children. The research shows that there are so many reasons why this builds distrust between caregivers and children. And right now, kids need people to turn to. So I would advise caregivers right now not to spank their children. If the child has previous trauma, make sure that you get them into counseling because they're going to be finding other ways to meet those needs, and traffickers will identify them because of their vulnerabilities.
Yep. Jennifer, do you have any other things that you've been seeing through this time, how traffickers are approaching our kids?
I think she did a great job. There's nothing I would add.
Yeah, great. You know, I've seen an increase in traffickers being a little bit more bold in their asks, right? So they will actually message kids, do you want a sugar daddy? Right? That's one way that the traffickers will try. You know, what does that mean? What is a sugar daddy, right? So this whole sugar daddy is an older gentleman who's going to prey upon young women on their vulnerabilities, right? And typically they want money to buy things. So it could start simple as, hey, if you just send me a picture, I'm actually going to put money in your account. And so they just send a picture and they get tangible money in their account. And then it just escalates from there, right? So, or just, do you want a sugar daddy? Do you know what that is? Oh, come on. I mean, our executive director at TAT, her daughter was working in a coffee shop. Actually, some guy approached her right on the spot and said, hey, do you need a pimp? I mean, that's insane, right? That can happen in a neighborhood coffee shop. And so through this time, I feel like the traffickers are just getting a little bit more brazen than they've been in the past, just from what I'm hearing, you know, because they know that more and more vulnerabilities are existing for our kids. And so, you know, they can approach them through any apps, through any messaging. I think there's this one, some of these apps have a connection to Snapchat. And Snapchat has something called Snap Maps. And so where they locate you. So if your kid is talking with someone else on a different app and connects with them via Snapchat, now that person is going to know where they live. So you need to make sure, I would, as an adult, as a parent, go through all of your kids' apps and look at their security settings, right? Is it public or is it private? And so we want to change all of those to private so that we hopefully don't get quite as much of that approaching. But most of these are still as default to public. That's just the reality of the situation. And you scroll through and you read through their list, right, of all these rules, right? Do you agree? Yep, I agree, I consent. Well, most of that consenting at the end is that property, that anything that's created on that app is the ownership of that app, not of you, right? So if it gets to a point where it escalates, where maybe your daughter or son sends a picture that's a little bit inappropriate, now that is the owner of the app, right? So these kinds of things, they interrelate, and you just need to be as careful as you can, talking to your kids about why we don't do things. They don't want to post pictures of, you know, them wearing like their high school t-shirt right next to their house, and then someone can infer where they live. Things like that for security purposes for our kids is important to talk with them. Hopefully that's in some of those 10 conversation starters, those resources out there. Now, what happens? What if we think that our child is in the process of being groomed, or maybe not even our child? We should be looking out for our kids' friends too, right? So I would encourage you parents, this is not a in your house conversation. This is you need to be talking to parents, other parents, asking what they're talking to their kids about, telling them what you know about it. We need to live in a village. I say that all the time. I probably said it last time. We need to live in a village, and where other people are taking care of our kids as well. But anyway, if we think that our kid is being groomed or they're being trafficked in some way, what are some good ideas for the next steps? Jennifer, do you have thoughts on that?
Sure, I've got a few. My first gut, report, call the trafficking hotline, call local law enforcement. We've worked with some amazing law enforcement officers here in the greater New Orleans area, but reporting it to the national trafficking hotline, knowing what that number is, and they've got not only just the number, but they've got the texting too, to be able to teach that to the child as well. So
yeah, so let me just pause there. The phone number for the National Human Trafficking Hotline, which everybody should have on their phone, is 888-3737-888. They can also text "Be Free" and get some help through that text line. Okay, unpause. Go ahead, back to Jennifer.
No, that that's where I would start. Would be reporting and then zoning in laser focus on my child and whatever needed. If there needed to be immediate protection, whatever that meant, whatever, going to, therapy, medical appointments, whatever that child needs. I'm sure Maria has a lot to add to.
Maria, any other thoughts on that?
No, exactly what Jennifer said. The first thing you want to do is report, especially if you're a mandatory reporter. It is a felony not to report. And literally exactly what Jennifer said, you need to just make sure that your kids' needs are met. If you have a child who's leaving home and running away, which is often how kids end up getting exploited, is because they leave home and they have to survive and they have to do things to survive. Asking yourself as a caregiver, has something happened, or am I doing something to make this child run away? I think one of the most underutilized services truly is family therapy. I think all families would benefit from going to family counseling. That's one thing. Just as Jennifer mentioned, making sure that you're sending your child to trauma-focused counseling. And if you do suspect that, they may be trafficked, get their medical needs met. It's possible that they have an infection that they don't know about. It's possible that they don't understand how infection is transmitted. So make sure you have a conversation with them about that. Also, just the social considerations of trafficking. Usually a child is turning to a trafficker because that person is meeting some type of physical or emotional need that's not being met elsewhere. So make sure that kid is in, not just in school, but in healthy activities, with kids that they identify with.
Yeah, that's great. 100% believer that we should all be in therapy at some point in our lives, not because of, our parents were terrible, but just life is hard, right? Life is hard, and there's no shame in going to therapy. Just throwing it out there, my friends, no shame in going to therapy.
Amen, sister.
All right, so we've had some great ideas on some topics to direct the parents to, and how to engage their kids in conversation. So I appreciate all of that. I think it's just about time to wrap things up. It is 45 minutes after the hour. I do want to encourage everyone also to just engage in your community. I know I said we need to be a village, and we need to be a village. And so know your neighbors, know your kids' friends, know your kids' friends' parents. parents, all that good stuff is very important when we're going to talk to our kids, and then maybe our kids will talk to their friends. You never know what might happen. So I'm going to turn this back over to Michelle, and she can direct us on Q&A. Sorry.
Okay, great.
My train of thought.
No problem. Thank you, ladies. This was an amazing conversation. Yes, we want to open it up to Q&A if anyone has any questions. I actually have a question myself. So I have 2 kiddos, and I thought this was a extremely important discussion. But also at the same time, do y'all have any advice on, like, I have younger children. How do you talk about it with them without scaring them? How do you talk about this topic? You know, are there different approaches or ways, things to say? And maybe it's in some of those apps and resources that y'all provided, but maybe if y'all had any insight, I'd love to hear it on that. Oh, Maria,
Well, I mean,
or Jennifer, sorry.
Go ahead,
Or
Maria.
Susan.
Jennifer, go ahead. You, Jennifer, go ahead.
You know, it depends on how old your child is, you know, and not, you know, you don't want to instill a worldview of fear, but you do want to, and I'm a strong believer is if you can gear them and strengthen them in the things that are right and the things that are good, then when they are faced with the things that are not good, they're going to know, and they're going to have that feeling that things are not right. As you know, specific, Maria, you probably have some more to add to that.
I don't necessarily think that a discussion with a child has to include the word human trafficking. I think it really just needs to be a conversation about people taking advantage of us or taking from us because we're nice or because we have this thing that makes us more vulnerable. Like I said before, I don't think that we need to be scaring the kids, just like you mentioned, Michelle. Truly the best thing that a parent can do is make sure that kid knows that they can always come to them, no matter what it is. Even if you do something that I tell you not to do or that I tell you is dangerous, if it happens, you can come to me. A lot of these kids do not have supportive caregivers, and that's why they seek out to meet these needs in other ways. So just telling your kids that you love them, that you support them, and when something happens, saying, I believe you, it wasn't your fault, kids hear that and they respond to that.
That's a great point. And yeah, oh, Susan, do you have something? Go ahead.
No, I agree with that. You know, one thing that I've been thinking about and talking to others about, right, is the fact that we need to trust our kids, and we need to let them know that we trust them and we believe in them, and also that they need to stand up for themselves. So that's another thing too, right? Like they can't be a doormat, right? So you can be nice to somebody, but that doesn't mean that they get to do bad things to you, right? This whole concept of, oh, I'm nice. And some of us, you know, are more people pleasers than others, and our kids are more people pleasers than others, right? And so knowing your kids' temperament and how they react to things is important. So just encouraging them, you know, to be nice, but to stand up for things that are right.
Absolutely. Great advice. Thank you all very much. So we have another question in the chat box. The question from an attendee says, if we want to donate to anti-trafficking organizations, which do you recommend?
Well, there's 2 local ones. Right here.
2 locals and 1 national, right, on the call.
Yeah, I would say I think it's important to be involved in your local community. I really do. And so donating to local organizations is extremely important. And so, you know, the 2 that these 2 are involved with, right? Audrey Hepburn Care Center at Children's Hospital, and New Orleans Advocacy Center, apparently 3, and Eden House. I know that when I was in New Orleans last year, we had a survivor from Eden House on the panel, and she was amazing. And so I know that's a great organization. So yeah, anything local with anti-trafficking, just do a Google search. There's plenty out there.
Do y'all have any others, Maria or Jennifer?
It's not necessarily that I have any in particular, but if there are organizations such as Eden House, where there are survivor advocates, I would really ask them, what did you need when you were going through your period of healing, and what do you think I should do with this money? A lot of times we make these decisions and we don't really include the survivors in decision making. We look at them as if they have some type of deficit because they were victims, and that's absolutely not true. Their experience made them stronger. So I think any organization that's led by survivor mentors, Eden House meets every need that a survivor has. They're obviously a wonderful place to donate to. Us at the Children's Advocacy Center, we give kids, we have a lot of kids who come in homeless, so we'll give them items that they need in order to survive wherever they end up next. So Junior League also, there's just so many wonderful, wonderful organizations locally and nationally.
Great.
Yeah, I do want to add, Eden House has a social enterprise, which is especially Eden. And so when you purchase products, you can purchase individual products or gift baskets. And anytime you purchase a product or a gift basket, it goes towards helping our women there. And a lot of our products are handmade by our women. Some of them are local women businesses that, we're supporting our community. So, yeah.
Wonderful. Yes, we actually had the baskets in person last year when we got to do this panel in person. But yes, that will happen again at some point, right? Okay, so we have another question from an attendee. She says, I've heard people say masks may make kids more vulnerable to trafficking. Can you clarify? I'm pro-mask, of course, but was curious about this topic, looking for a fact check.
I'm going to have to defer to Jennifer or Maria on that one.
Yeah, I don't know that I have heard that as a fact. I could see where it can cause some problems. Just, not being able to, it's hard for me to know who I'm talking to when if I'm going to the grocery store. But I have not heard, I think, 2020, I think we will know more in 6 months or a year.
Yeah.
It's still developing, and so we don't know.
Great. Another question. If I'm looking to get involved, what can I do?
Yeah, that's a great question. Again, I would say locally, looking locally at any houses for survivors, for those coming out of trafficking, even homeless populations, right? Because a lot of youth come through the homeless system, working with youth that are going to be vulnerable as well. So mentoring youth who are in the foster care system, all those are great ideas from, one level to the next. So that's my take on it. If Maria or Jennifer have other things.
Yeah. That was good.
Great advice. Well, we're kind of wrapping up. Before I click to a few slides, do you ladies have any final thoughts or words or anything that you'd like to say to the attendees tonight?
I don't, other than just thanks for joining us. I enjoyed it.
Great.
Yeah,
well,
thanks for having us. And I just encourage you guys as parents to really get involved with your kids, get involved with their activities, get to know them, be a village for their friends, do research on anything. And, if you ever have any questions, I'm always here for any questions. So thanks, Michelle.
Absolutely. And before we go, one of our amazing Abolish Committee members actually just put into the chat box a survey link. And if attendees wouldn't mind taking a few minutes, we'd love to hear from you, feedback on tonight and ways that we can continue to improve these conversations and or topics that you may be interested in hearing about. We're looking to continue to facilitate those as webinars right now and hopefully eventually back in person at some point. But I'm going to share screens real fast to Yes. Okay. So our next webinar, so this was the second one in our 3-part series. The next one is happening on Tuesday, January 19th at 7:30 p.m. So it's open, it's free to the public. So if you know anybody, please encourage them to attend and join in on our conversation. This one will be centered around how we can fight human trafficking. So around taking action as an individual or as a group. So thank you again to our attendees. And again, special thank you to our Abolish Committee. They are behind the scenes working as we speak to make tonight happen. We mentioned about the survey and then about January 19th. So one other thing that I did want to make sure to mention, and actually a way to possibly give back, is in January, our committee is putting together with Eden House, so Jennifer and her team, as well as Covenant House, 2 amazing organizations here who serve victims, and doing a drive to help support these victims. So we are developing Amazon wish lists right now in coordination with both of these groups, and we'll be sharing that with anybody who attended. We'll push it out through social media as well, but if that is of interest, January is Trafficking Awareness Month. And so as a way to give back, we are encouraging our community to do so that way. So please be on the lookout for that. And then just again, these are resources. If you do need any resources or know anyone who needs resources, we have this on our website, on the Junior League website. So we please encourage you to reach out. And then as Susan mentioned, and we put in the chat, the main thing is to know the trafficking hotline or to text if you need to do so. So with that, I think we will conclude tonight's discussion. Again, thank y'all very much. I know I personally learned a lot tonight that I will take back and have conversations with my family. So thank you again. And thank you to all the attendees who were able to join tonight. We really appreciate your time. Thank y'all very much.
Bye, have a great night.